Okay, good evening, everyone. So how are you feeling? Okay, tomorrow we are expecting, I guess, really cold temperature. But I think that this presentation is going to warm you up and be enough for all of us to survive tomorrow cold temperature. I actually want to start with this slide because I was very encouraged by your presentations and your participation and feedback last time about how important is really to take care about environment and how important is really to think about future generations to come. So this is one of the most latest studies that are focusing on pretty much all of you. So when were you all born? When? What year? 94. Okay. Okay. So I think all of you belong to this new Z generation, or sometimes we call them, new Z generation. And for all of you guys, it seems that ethics do matter, or ethics does matter, sorry, and that you do your research well before you think about buying any particular product. And I came across these two companies. One is Geona Pharmacy, and another one is Aspiration Partners. And maybe you haven't heard about them, but this is what they do. So can we just... Okay, so the first one article that I want to point out to you is Answering Society's Call: A New Leadership Imperative. And what this one is about is really emphasizing the importance of environment and ethics. And then if we can scroll it down. Okay, scroll it down. If we get to that Genoa, if anybody sees that company first. Okay. So this is one of those interesting companies, Aspiration Partners. It's a quite new financial institution, like maybe 4 years old or something, but they do something very differently. Usually when we think about financial institution, what comes to your mind? We think about banks. What comes to your mind immediately? Money, of course. It comes to your mind, money. What about what do they do other than money? Do you care what do they do? Or just to make as much money as possible for themselves and for you? Well, this is a little bit different company. Now if you can do the next, that one. Okay. And then with okay, yes. Okay, what is interesting with this bank is okay. What is interesting with this bank is the following. Uh, they donate 10% of its income and offers in an app feature that guides aspirations to environmentally and people-friendly businesses. So they are upfront telling you, number one, usually when you have a bank account, usually what happens is that you have to pay a certain fee. When you go to ATM or bancomat, when you want to withdraw your money, you pay a certain fee if you're withdrawing your money from another bancomat that doesn't belong to your bank. Well, this bank is saying, you know what, that's not going to happen with us. And believe it or not, they're also saying, like, if you don't want to pay a fee for our services, you don't need to pay our fee for our services. It's up to you to decide how much you want to pay for our services. If you're happy, that's fine. But what's so unique about this bank is that they are actually telling you that they are not going to invest in companies that are polluting the environment. And not only that, but they're going to donate 10% of its income to environmental and people-friendly businesses. So a little bit different approach than we are basically using in the past. And I just wanted to start with this one because I was inspired with your participation last time, and I was really very pleased that you did mention that that environment and caring about environment is really, really important. And then if we can go to the next slide. Have you ever heard about this Happy Planet Index? Anybody heard about Happy Planet Index? Okay, now you're going to find out what Happy Planet Index is. It's really, really something unique. And can you point? Can you point here? Okay. Click. No. Sorry. I want Russia. Sorry. My bad. Click on Russia. Click on Russia. Okay, and then click here. Okay, so what this Happy Planet Index is measuring is actually measuring the well-being and the status of one country based on those criteria: life expectancy, well-being, ecological footprint. Okay, so life expectancy, how long people live, well-being, ecological footprint, and inequality. And then they're scoring all of those, and based on all little bit shrink, so I can a little bit and based on all of that, out of 140 countries, Russia is scoring 116. As you can see here, a life expectancy is really not that high. Well-being is some so-so. Footprint is this one. Now, what do you think? How well is scoring United States? So this is like 116 out of 140. Much better. What does that much better mean? Give me on this scale. We have 140 countries. Where do you think the United States will score? In top 20. How many of you agree that this will be in the top 20 United States? Okay, so you were really looking at all those details. Very good, very good. So can we go up and to the map? Where do you think that US is not scoring well out of this life expectancy and all of that? So here. Footprint, ecological footprint. Yes, very true. Click. And yeah. And as you can see, it's really not that significantly better. It's 108. A life expectancy is significantly higher. People in the United States do live much longer. Well-being is significantly better, but this is what hurts actually United States the most, and that's that ecological footprint. If you remember from that video from last time, well, we will need actually a few planets Earth in order to live if we all have the same lifestyle as Americans do, and inequality is not that bad, but it can be really significantly improved. Did you catch which country is the best one? Okay, let's go to the map. And let's go here. So Mexico scored very high. Why? Because they have very low ecological footprint. Obviously, their well-being is okay, life expectancy okay. Where they're scoring very poorly is really with this inequality, because there is a huge inequality over there. And then let's try to find Norway, somebody said. Let's go to the map. Well, they're not green, but let's click here if we can. This one. Yeah. Sorry, this one. It's okay, I wasn't seeing well. Okay, it's 12, so it's really not bad, but it's not as high as you will expect. And again, they have not the worst ecological footprint, but again, you will see that most well-developed economies, unfortunately, are going to have a little bit higher ecological footprint. Okay, is there any other country that you would like to find out about? Sorry? Singapore. Okay, let's go to the map. And then we'll go to China as well. Okay, so let me just see. Okay. Click here. I don't know if that's going to show up. No, that's not over here. Can you do this one? No, I don't think that they have it. Then do this one. It's not Singapore, but it's Vietnam. Vietnam is less developed economy. It has probably much better ecological footprint, as you can see. Okay, and let's do China. A map. Let's see their ecological footprint. Again, not really doing well, and so that's what's hurting them. But life expectancy is higher than in Russia. Okay, now let's move from here. And actually, for all of you who are in the class, I would like you to go to this Happy Planet Index and calculate your own Happy Planet Index. And then we'll talk about that on Friday. So all of you who are in the classroom, go there, calculate your own. It's going to be very interesting what you're going to find out. And then tonight, the major topic that I would like to talk about tonight is actually foreign direct investment. So who remember last week we talked about the reasons why the companies would like to go and expand their business internationally? What did we say? Why the companies are going overseas? Or going outside their own borders? What are the yes? There are more customers. Okay, okay. So to expand their markets, very good. What are the other reasons? Okay. Anything else? Okay, very good, very good. Anything else? Now, those were maybe the reasons why we were saying that they're expanding globally by exporting. But what do you think about foreign direct investment? Why would company want to go in another country and start their own facilities there? What is the reason for that? Gains of profit. Okay, very good. Profit is always there, absolutely, as a reason. Okay, anything else? Anybody else? Just where? In the country? There are strict regulations. So why will you go there if there are strict regulations? So there are tariff barriers. There are tariff barriers. You cannot export. Very good. Very good. Yes. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Okay. So all good reasons. Now let's find out about that foreign direct investments. And there are basically two types of foreign direct investment. One is, and you heard about that, is something that is called greenfield investment, as the world says it on its own. What you're doing here, basically, you're starting from the very, very beginning. You are building your own company. You're building your own factory. You're building your own subsidiary. And the other one is mergers and acquisitions. So what's the difference? If I start, let's say I'm from the United States, I come here, and I want to build my own factory. That will be greenfield investment. How is that different than merger and acquisition? How can I do merger and acquisition from the United States in Russia? What will I have to do? Excellent, excellent. So I will have to buy the existing company. So do you think that that's easier than starting in greenfield?
But it depends in which field, I guess. Yeah, because for example, the company is in Russia and you know everything basically, like you don't need to explore it.
Very good, and they're already there. So the business is there, it's already running, and so no wonder then mergers and acquisitions are basically the way how the companies are expanding the fastest around the world. It's much easier, if they have enough funds, of course, to buy something that already exists than to start from scratch, to start from the very, very bottom. Okay? Again, I'm going to introduce a few topics here, basically so that when we talk about foreign direct investments and when you read about foreign direct investment, that you can actually relate a little bit better. So what we have here, we have outflow of foreign direct investment. What will be outflow of Russian foreign direct investment? What will that be? Anybody? Very good. So where is Russia expanding? Where is Russia buying companies? Where is Russia building companies around the world? And then definitely inflow of foreign direct investment will be, let's say, where are Chinese coming to Russia and building facilities, or are Chinese buying already existed for companies in Russia? So those will be the two important terms that I would like you to remember. And of course, we have a flow of foreign direct investment when something is leaving the country and going to another country. And then there is a stock, which basically a total accumulation of value of foreign investment. I think that what I underline here is basically going to tell you the importance, how really, really significant foreign direct investments are, because they are growing rapidly, more rapidly than world trade and world output. And the reasons for all of that is, as somebody mentioned here, yes, you can actually buy entering the foreign country, you can avoid tariff barriers, where if there is a protectionism, then you just start your own company there, and then you can avoid that. We have the general shift our democratic political institution is happening, so basically the other markets are opening for foreign direct investment. So those are some of the reasons why foreign direct investments are growing. This is pretty much the latest information about foreign direct investment. And this is the part of UNCTAD where you can find really, really great information about everything that is dealing with foreign direct investment. And what you can see here is this line over here is presenting actually the world total foreign direct investment. And this line here is basically the green one is presenting how much are developed economies investing, and this is how much developing economies. And again, transition economies are really on the bottom, meaning like the least contribution to foreign direct investments. This is the inward rates of return, which every business is looking for, is like how much money I can make. You said, they want profit. So this is basically how much money you can make if you invest in developed economies, if you invest in developing countries based by the region, and if you invest in transition economies. Obviously, here there are higher yields than in well-developed economies, but also each time when you see somewhere that there's higher yield, that means there is more risk. There is always a trade-off between risk and the rate of return. Historically, obviously, the foreign direct investment will go to the country that is developed and also will leave the country that is very, very developed. So United States used to be and still is really the country that attracts the most foreign direct investment. And as well, Americans are investing globally significantly. However, we have other countries joining, obviously from Asia, and in particular China in last probably 10 years or so is becoming more and more interesting in expanding foreign direct investments abroad. But up to 10 years ago, it was really attracting a lot of foreign direct investment. And this one I want to show you by country. How much are they getting foreign direct investment? And if you, as you see, United States is the leading, and Russia is number 13. And this is the outflow. So this one was attracting foreign direct investment. As you can see, why do you think that United States in 2016, in 2017, pretty much in the last 50 years, was the country that attracts the most foreign direct investment? Why do you think that the United States is the place to invest and to start with foreign direct investment? Yeah.
Perhaps because it's the safest place to start a business, because it's liberated economy, so there is a set of rules that will be counted for your business. Yeah, and the capitalism is protected from the United States. So.
Quite naive, but people buy more there.
It's a huge market, very, very huge market. And
It's stable market, dollar is strong currency. Yeah.
anybody else? Okay, those are pretty good reasons and pretty accurate reasons. Now this next table is going to show us where the outflow, so top 20 home economies. United States again, Japan, China, and here is Russian Federation. So quite high, but not in the first 10 spots. Okay, we already talked about that. Now, these are some of the reasons why the companies will actually go abroad and invest in different countries through merger and acquisitions. What do you think about those points? Definitely, we said that they're quicker, the risk is lower. What do you think about the last one? The firms believe they can increase the efficiency of an acquired unit by transferring capital, technology, and management skill. So those are the reasons why they will go, and they will go through mergers and acquisitions, and because they are hoping their efficiency is going to be higher. Does any company comes to your mind? Anything? Why will you, to begin with, invest somewhere where there is no efficiency? You can, first you can transfer technology, but at the same time you can transfer know-how. Know-how is very important. The local company will like to receive that know-how because that will teach them how, again, I was telling the guys in international economics class how important it is to make more with less. So if you have a good management, if you have a good organization, you can actually make with the same resources, or you can actually have less resources and you can make more. These are the value and number of net cross-border merger and acquisition, and this is the number. As you can see, the number of mergers and acquisition is really, really very, very high, and it's kind of steadily, holding its place. What will be the downsides of foreign direct investment? Okay, you are a company and you invested, you basically started, let's say, with this green field, you built a factory. What can be the downsides of you entering another country, investing in that other country, building the facilities in that other country? What can be the downside of that? Yes, for investing.
Maybe, as I think the bad side that the more foreign investors invest in our companies, there could be addiction on those investments, and local investments have no possibility to attract in local companies.
Definitely, we always have that competition happening, and if you have more developed, more sophisticated foreign company entering your local market, now they're going to compete on the local market, but they will be actually bringing much higher efficiency, and maybe that for some local companies may be a big threat. But I also want you to look from the perspective of that foreign investor. What can go wrong for him?
For foreign investors, it's harder to take into account local culture and maybe traditions. Like if you want to hire some people, some staff for a company, you should take into account many factors. And for a local investor, it's much easier because he's in this environment for ages and he knows how it works and what happened in this case and in another case. And for foreign investors, it's much harder.
Perhaps there could be some problems with foreign government. Like, what is this? A conflict between your government and the foreign government where you settle your business?
That's absolutely both of those reasons are really, really very correct. I will start with Alina's. You may invest in a country, but what about if that country enters in a war with you, and your investment are pretty much stuck in that country? It's very difficult if you have foreign direct investment to sell them, or at least to sell them very fast. So that will be the downside. And again, you are very, very Ilya? Nikita, sorry. And then Nikita is also right because obviously if the foreign company is entering the local market, they do not know necessarily local culture. It may be very difficult for them to do a good human resources. And that's one of the reasons why in pretty much all foreign direct investment companies, you will find that actually the director of HR is always going to be a local person. And the reason for that is the person who is going to be in charge of employing local people. So he or she knows better how to communicate in that language. He or she knows much better local rules and regulations. On the other hand, very often in multinational corporations around the globe, they're actually going to have a chief financial officer. That's the person who is in charge of money, to put it very simply. That person is usually going to come from the host country because they don't want the locals to deal that much with the financials. And so that's. Do you have any questions? Okay. Again, I put this one because for all of you who are maybe thinking about your final paper for this class, and for everybody else who is interested in finding more information about foreign direct investment, this UNCTAD is really, really good. This is the latest their publication, where you can find a lot of very, very useful tables, figures, but what is also very important is analysis. So I highly recommend this source, and it's quite reputable source as well, and it's easily found. You can find it on your Google search if you want. You don't need necessarily any particular access to that one. Now, we have noticed that all over the world, we are trading less in good products, and the trade in services are significantly increasing. So why do you think that nowadays there is a huge increase? If you even look at the gross domestic product and share of services in gross domestic product versus the share of manufacturing in gross domestic product, you will find out that over the years, the services are increasing its share in gross domestic product. And in particular, if you look most developed economies, nowadays is probably somewhere between 70 to 80% of GDP comes from services, not from production of goods and products. So that's very interesting. On that note, I would like you now to use your smartphones and find out what is the percentage of services in Russian GDP. So what, how much are services contributing to gross domestic product of Russia? And then also search for how much are services contributing to gross domestic product of United States. So find out. So what is it?
62% is the service in the structure of GDP of Russia in 2018. Let me check.
To 80%. And then again, in order to get a better picture, it will be good to compare, let's say, for Russia in 1991, what was the percentage of services in GDP versus today, and for United States, maybe to compare what was in the 50s contribution of production of goods, and it was much more significant than it's today, obviously. So, who is going to answer me this question? What are the factors that are negatively affecting export, And we did mention already something. And what are the factors that are negatively affecting licensing? So therefore, we have increase of importance of foreign direct investments when we are thinking about expanding globally. So what are those factors that are not working for us? We already heard somebody said about tariffs. So other than tariff barriers, what can else be preventing company to export to another country?
I think someone already said it, but trade wars.
Well, maybe I will sound too basic, but it's like laws of the country. It's like you remember like those Kinder Surprise eggs, and they're prohibited in the United States because food in the United States, according to laws, they can contain any inedible pieces in it. So does it count?
Also, I think culture like religion also can be a barrier in some Muslim countries.
Very true. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why we can't export as much as maybe we will like. And at the same time, for licensing, what about licensing? Do you know what licensing is? Okay, you are giving a license to somebody to produce with all those specifications, with all those instructions. You're giving them license to produce the product in that foreign country. So what will be the limitation of licensing? Excellent point. Excellent point. You know, you have to trust your foreign partner. And you may not necessarily trust your foreign partner to begin with because of the culture, because of the history, because of so many different things. So instead of giving them a license because you don't trust them, you actually want to start that business on your own. So to keep that knowledge for yourself. We didn't mention transportation costs. As you know, like if you want to export something from, let's say, China to maybe UK, it's kind of pretty far away. Or maybe from South Africa to Norway, again, it's a little bit far away. So because of that, it might be more profitable, if you want, to start the company in that particular country. We already talked about this. So let's move on. And we did say something about those licensing that you don't necessarily want basically to share your knowledge and know-how with the local partner because you don't really trust them that much. What's your name? Anna. Thank you for that contribution, Anna. Now, these are the advantages of foreign direct investment. I would like you to think about one foreign company that is investing in human and tell me what that company is, and maybe do you work for that company? Do you know somebody who works for that company? And then we'll talk about that. So is there any, I know that there is, but what foreign company do you know that it is in human?
Like a little bit difficult example, but still, PCA Deutag. So they do like servicing for rigs. So for those companies who actually dig wells for oil and gas. So they have their facility in Chile. I think here they're quite big because then they are working with actual rigs in the north, so it's easier for them to have hub here, right? So then they can control. Yeah, they're German company. Not that much. I've been to this company as a visit. Yeah. Well, what do you want to know about management? Yeah. For example, I know. Yeah. Interesting fact then. So one of them, I think let's call him. I think he was one of the directors, one of the main persons there. And he was a German, but the person he actually already worked in Russia like for 20 years. So that I found it really interesting. So that they decided to choose a person who was already into the environment and who, for example, has already seen different system of Russia, like working in the Soviet Union and things like that. Yeah, what else? And what I remember also, they didn't have a lot of foreign stuff, so all the stuff that they have is Russian, but they attracted from different regions too. Workers, sorry, yeah. And machines, I think, I'm not sure that they are built in Russia, but can be.
Thank you. Does anybody know any foreign company here in Human, or do you know any Russian company that is overseas? If you don't, yeah, go ahead.
As for foreign companies, I can add Schlumberger and Ashan. I think it's French one. And for Russian companies overseas, it's Sibur and Nipigas. I think they are very successful. They are managing some projects together with some foreigners companies, and they're pretty successful. India. No, I don't remember other countries.
And as you can see here, a firm will favor a foreign direct investment over license if it wants to control its technology know-how, if wants over its operation and business strategies, and basically maybe the firm's capabilities are not really favorable for licensing to begin with. Now, when I'll go. Yeah. I would like you to remember, all of you who are taking this as a class, I would like you to remember this Eclectic Paradigm by John Dunnings. And what basically he's saying is why the companies are going overseas and why they're investing outside their home country is because of ownership advantage, because of location, and because of internationalization. What that basically means is the following. The company will go overseas and invest in another country because there are the benefits if you own the company versus if you don't own the company. So if you have like Russian company overseas, and let's suppose it's a like oil company, if you own the company overseas, that means that you are in charge of that company and you have much more power. The next one is location. And location, do you think that Russian oil company will invest in the part of the world where there is no oil? Obviously, they will not invest. So, in order for a company who is, let's say, in mining, extracting, they will go where those mines are, where those coal, coal is, or where that oil is. So there is a location-specific advantage. In order for you, if you need that particular, let's say, raw material, and you don't want to depend on import from that country, you actually want to provide a direct line for that material to come to your country, you will actually go overseas. The good example of this policy is actually what China is doing nowadays. China is heavily investing all over the world, but it's heavily investing in Africa. Why do you think that they are heavily investing in Africa? What's there in Africa? Sorry? Resources, very good. So they're investing there because they need resources for their economic development. So why not go there, have that as your ownership? The resources are there. Now there is the third thing in this theory, and it's called internationalization advantage. Now, if you look at this one, the last one, externalities, knowledge spillover that occurs when companies in the same industry located in the same area. I'm sure that you know a lot about United States, but what is Silicon Valley? What companies are in Silicon Valley? Do you know what companies are in Silicon Valley in United States?
Like Google, Impala, and Amazon. Yes. Google, Impala Alta, Microsoft, Amazon, and the IT. I think because of legislation. No. Maybe because there are a lot of people qualified enough to work there.
Anything else? Okay, so definitely we have Silicon Valley, and you said right. I mean, all those IT companies are located there. The reason is because you have those qualified people, but there is something in addition. When you have all of those IT guys living in the same city, what will be the benefit of that for that particular sector? When you have all of those talented, educated people that belong to the same industry, living in the same environment, how that can benefit?
So they will share their experience.
Definitely, but you know how they're going to share? They're obviously, each of them, if they work for at least American companies, they can't work 3 years for one company and then with that knowledge they go to another company, and they have actually to sign an agreement that they're not going to compete inside the industry because they already have a lot of knowledge. But what is going to happen is the following. Those people are people. So what do you usually do on Fridays in Russia? What do you do on Fridays evening if you don't have this wonderful class of international business, which is on Tuesdays and Thursdays? What do you do? How do you spend your time? Oh, yes. Now, don't be serious. Just be honest. Sorry? Of course, you meet with friends, you go out, and what do? You meet them. You meet a guy from Amazon, you meet a guy from, like Microsoft, and they start talking. And then when they start talking, you have these benefits of that synergy, that all that knowledge that belongs to the same industry is together. So by exchanging like regular just conversation, something can pop up in your head. Wow, let's explore this one. Let's see how this can work. What do you think? What is located in New Jersey? All the companies that belong to that particular industry are located in New Jersey, in United States. What do you think? What industry those companies belong to? New Jersey is just the state south of New York State. It is something about the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry. Almost every important pharmaceutical company in the world is located there. They have some facility there. They don't need to have a huge offices over there, but they have some facilities over there for the very same reason. They want that synergy. They want that is called here spillover effect. That when you have so many people they have the same knowledge, so many new wonderful things can be created. Yes.
Maybe I'm not getting it, but do you mean Stanford University? No?
Universities are definitely there as well. They're definitely there, but I was more thinking about corporations in that particular field. We'll get to universities in the next slide. Ah, that's me. Sorry. Now, how many of you heard about this guy, Porter, and Diamond? Everybody likes diamonds. Diamonds are forever. He came up in the beginning of 90s with this very, very interesting book that is called National Competitive Advantage. And what basically he said, you are probably reading about this Adam Smith theory of absolute advantages. You are probably reading about this theory of Ricardo about comparative advantages and why trade happens. However, what we have here, he said, it's really important for the company and for the nation to be competitive. And he said, if the nation wants to be competitive, we have to have a rivalry. We have to have competition. He also said, we have to have a demand condition. It is very difficult to develop something if you don't have local people, local companies that are going to demand it. So you have to have imminent market for your product. He also said that you have to have a related and supporting industry. We'll come up to that one, but let's suppose that you are in, let's suppose that you are in garment industry, like fashion industry, okay? So you have rivalry. Let's suppose that you are in Paris, in France. You have rivalry. There are a lot of those fashion companies there. There is a demand in France for fashion. What will be related at supporting industries for fashion industry? Textile. What else will be? They belong to that fashion as well. So, sorry? What are the supporting industry? What fashion industry? Sorry? Cosmetics. Oh, okay, cosmetics. Sorry? Model agencies. Yes, you have to have that, but keep going in that direction. Sorry? Film industry, okay, but mass media, excellent. I mean, those last three were really, really good. In order for fashion, what do we need? We need to be seen. We definitely need, like advertising agencies. So we definitely need those models that you talk about. What was the third one? Mass media. Okay, that's like, advertising agency, those sorts of things. And then finally, we need factor conditions. Now, I want to show you a very short video, so you will learn more from the person who actually came up with this idea. So, video. You can cut them.
I'm Tom Stewart, editor and managing director of the Harvard Business Review. Our guest today is Michael Porter, professor at Harvard University and head of the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness. He's the author of the forthcoming HBR article, The 5 Competitive Forces That Shape Strategy, a reaffirmation, update, and extension of his groundbreaking 1979 article, How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy. Mike, thanks for joining the program. To start, let's remind our viewers of what the 5 competitive forces are.
Well, Tom, the basic idea of the competitive forces starts with the notion that competition is often looked at too narrowly by managers. And the five forces say that, yes, you're competing with your direct competitors, but you're also in a fight for profits with a broader, extended set of competitors, customers who have bargaining power, suppliers who can have bargaining power, new entrants who might come in and kind of grab a piece of the action, and substitute products or services that essentially place a constraint or a cap on your profitability and growth. So the five forces is kind of a holistic way of looking at any industry and understanding the structural underlying drivers of profitability and competition.
So I use these to think about my rival makes it difficult for me. The threat of substitutes means I can't overcharge. The threat of new entrants means I can't overcharge.
Right.
And the same thing with the
buyers
power
and suppliers.
suppliers.
And there's underlying drivers of each of those forces that the model really sort of unveils, and then you can actually apply this. Every industry is different. Every industry will have a different set of economic fundamentals, but the five forces help you home in on, first of all, what's really causing profitability in your industry? What are the trends that are the most likely to be significant in changing the game in the industry? Where are the constraints which, if you can relax them, might allow you to find a really strong competitive position?
So how would you apply this analysis to an industry? Airlines, for example.
Well, airlines is a great industry. It's actually, you'll see in the article, you've seen in the article, that there's a chart that compares profitability of industries, and airlines, I think, has been on the bottom of that list for decades. It's among the least profitable industries known to man. And the five forces really allows you very quickly to understand why. I mean, let's just go around the chart. The nature of rivalry is incredibly intense, and it's almost exclusively on price. It's been very hard to differentiate, to get the customer to wait even an extra 2 or 3 minutes for another flight if they can get on the flight at a cheaper price. So there's been a very intense price competition, low barriers to entry, a constant stream of new airlines coming into the industry, despite the fact that the profitability is low. It's always puzzled me.
Low barriers to entry because you can rent a plane, you don't have to
can
buy
rent a
them.
plane. You can rent a plane, you can lease a gate. It's all generic technology. You can start with one flight between 2 city pairs. You don't have to. There's no real need to have a whole network in the beginning. And yet people keep coming in. I think it's just one of those sexy industries. It's a great example of how sexiness or coolness or hotness or chicness has nothing to do with industry profitability. It's the underlying structure is what drives profitability. The customer is very fickle and price sensitive. Suppliers of aircraft and aircraft engines and even aircraft gates at airports now have a lot of clout. They can bargain away most of the profits. GE and Rolls-Royce and Airbus and Boeing make a lot more money than airlines. They get most of the profit. And then, of course, there's always a substitute of getting on the train or driving your car or shipping your goods by air, and that's kind of kept a concern.
And you have powerful suppliers of labor too. That's another powerful supplier.
Right, exactly. There's a great case where you have unionized labor, and unlike other industries, in this industry, particularly with the pilots, the labor can literally shut you down, and there's no way around them. So it's an industry where there are spurts of what you might call mediocre profitability, punctuated by long periods of terrible profitability.
So every one of the five forces is very strong in that industry. Yeah. And you could take another industry where the five forces are right. Relatively benign.
Right.
In all
like soft drinks. I mean, soft drinks has been a license to mint money, and again, it's the opposite kind of analysis. When I talk with students, we kind of joke around. There's 5-star industries where all the forces are attractive, like soft drinks. There's 0-star industries where all the forces are unfavorable, like airlines. And we're always trying to understand, okay, what's the configuration of underlying economic drivers that's going to really shape the profit potential of this industry? And then armed with that insight, what do I do about it? How do I try to relax the constraint that's holding back industry profitability? How can I position myself to kind of insulate from some of the gale winds of those forces? And those implications of the five forces are something that this new article has developed in much more detail.
You conceived this framework nearly 3 decades ago, and it has been the most extensively used both in management scholarship and management practice of any strategy framework, and it really has changed the definition of strategy in a lot of ways. In these 3 decades, what have you learned? What have you learned about the application of these ideas in the real world of business?
Well, the wonderful thing, of course, we learned is that these concepts can be applied to literally any industry. It's a product, a service, high tech, low tech, emerging economies, developed economies. Indeed, what one of the powers of the framework is it helps you avoid getting trapped or tricked by the latest trend or the latest technological sensation, and really allows you to focus on the underlying fundamentals. The internet's a good example. We got very, very confused by the internet because people saw the internet as a force as opposed to really enabling technology that might or might not impact the underlying structure of the industry. I think one thing I've learned is the framework is very, very robust, but I've also learned that there's a lot of confusion and complexity in actually applying the framework in actual practice, and we've tried to clear as many of those areas up as we could in this new article. For example, how to think about rivalry. How do we understand when rivalry is really positive sum, which allows companies to, many companies to do well, and when does rivalry become really zero sum, where everybody's kind of dragged down into kind of a destructive battle that you can't win?
I can understand zero sum. I mean, if we get in a price war, the only one who wins is the consumer, which is nice if you're a consumer. But what do you mean by positive sum competition?
Well, the trouble with the zero sum competition is then the consumer gets a low price, but they really get no choice. And a positive sum competition is where companies can compete on different attributes, services, features, customer support that's actually relevant to particular groups of customers. And the most really positive sum competition is where companies are really competing on different things in order to meet the needs of different segments.
So we're growing the pie and there's a piece for each of us.
There's a piece of us. In fact, one of the things we talk about in the new article, one of the things I did in the new article that we really probably didn't have the experience to do so many years ago was really talk a lot about the implications. If this is the way competition works, what do you do about it? And one of them might be, in some industries, rather than go for market share against your rivals, you might be much better off just really expanding the pie, expanding the whole profit pool of the industry. That may be the best way for a market leader to actually improve their circumstances rather than to trigger a destructive battle with their head-to-head rival.
How should a company get started using the 5 forces framework? You're working your strategy up. You decide this really works for me. How do you begin?
Well, I think industry analysis and looking at the competitive environment is, of course, probably the starting basic discipline of any strategy formulation process. If you don't know what your industry looks like, if you don't know how it's changing, if you don't know what the drivers of competition are, you might as well, strategy is going to be, marginally useful if not destructive. So we got to start with industry analysis. Figuring out what your industry is and drawing the right boundaries.
And that's not always easy.
It's not always easy. We've added a box in this new article which really addresses that question because I encountered so many companies that struggled with industry definition. Identifying really what the industry structure is in your particular industry. And then there's another thing that a lot of managers do. They kind of go through the industry analysis and they say, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. So this is a attractive industry or an unattractive industry. But of course, the real question is, how's that industry changing? Some have taken the 5 forces as really a static snapshot. But of course, the 5 forces give you the tools for understanding the dynamics and where's that industry structure changing? How are buyers and suppliers and substitutes and potential entry evolving? And then what implications does that hold for your strategy? How do you position yourself to find that spot within the industry that you're at, where you can command a really good profit given the 5 forces? How can you maybe reshape the nature of the industry structure? And we've got some great new examples that are very, very contemporary in this article that I think will help the manager community and the investor community really understand the application of this.
Sometimes when people think about strategy, they think about a group of people, maybe from a management consulting firm or maybe on the 33rd floor of the building, whatever it is, but this sort of elite strategy priesthood that goes and does this, and they're almost divorced from the rest of the management of the company, the 99% of the other people working in the company. How can how can a strategy become part of the day-to-day life of a working stiff manager in a company? How do you apply this framework, this thinking? How do you use it?
Well, we think that this way of looking at an industry needs to be very, very broadly understood in the organization. I mean, and the thing about it is that managers, even rank and file employees, it's intuitive. People understand. You know, we have these customers, we have these suppliers. We're struggling with them every day. They're trying to get a better deal. We're trying to get a better deal. So intuitively, I think this is a way of helping people sort of step back from all the excruciating little details that characterize any business and say, what's really important here? And then, of course, we've learned that strategy is completely useless, again, unless the results of the strategy process, the position that you choose to occupy, the way you're going to drive your company, is well understood quite broadly. Because the number one purpose of strategy is alignment. It's really to get all the people in the organization making good choices, reinforcing each other's choices, because everybody's pursuing a common value proposition, a common way of gaining competitive advantage. So, I remember when I wrote this article, there were many people who believed that strategy documents should be locked in the safe at night and should not be made available to the rank and file. There was a concern that some competitor would find some secret. Well, we've actually learned now that it's the opposite. You know, you've got your employees got to know your strategy, your channels have to know your strategy, your suppliers have to know your strategy,
And your competitors probably knew it already.
Well, and frankly, if again, the competition is not zero sum. If every company finds a unique need that it can set out to meet, if it tries to deliver something different than its rivals, multiple rivals can be successful. And if your competitors kind of understand what you stand for and what you're committed to, maybe they'll make a different choice rather than get dragged into these kind of mindless price wars that we see in so many industries.
The 5 forces that shape strategy have been around for 30 years. They're going to be around for, well, they've been around for long. They were around long before you wrote about them.
That's right.
They've been around as long as business has been around. They're going to be around as long as business is around. The new article is just fabulous, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to kind of getting another surge of feedback from the practitioners, and we'll keep learning. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, I want just to point out for something that he said at the almost very end, and just introduce one interesting book that some of you may really enjoy in reading it. At the end, he said something.
Porter's 5 Forces.
We got it. Okay, he said something very interesting and maybe not expected if you want. He said, definitely, we know that competition is good, but he said that it's actually good to have rivalry because, and it's even good if your competitors know what your strategy is, as long as you can try to find your own niche, your own uniqueness, and that you can differentiate yourself. And on that note, I would like you to write down this book, and you don't need necessarily to buy the book. You have it online in different forms and formats. Blue Ocean Strategy. Have you ever heard about Blue Ocean Strategy? Okay, Nikita is saying yes. Can you tell us something more than yes?
A bit about it. It's something about Greenfield, as I remember. No, am I right? Like this blue ocean is very vast space of territory of opportunities to do something, and we have no. I mean this. I mean blue ocean and Greenfield. Is it the same? No.
Way it's not, but because usually when you think about this rivalry, and he was saying, when you think about rivalry in the past, people are thinking, those 2 companies, those 5 companies, they're going to fight each other until one dies. And so that type of competition is actually so-called a red ocean competition, if you want, when you have the big fish is eating the small fish. and then you have a red ocean. These guys, what they came up with, very, very interesting. So blue ocean strategy, very, very interesting. It can be applied in many different fields, in many different companies, in many different countries for that matter, is saying, you know what, it's not about red, it's not about dying, it's actually, we can all find a space for ourselves if we try to develop something new, something a little bit different. And you will find a lot of interesting examples how, let's suppose, when you think about wine, which country is famous for its wine? France, obviously. Everybody, when they think about wine, they say, it has to be France. Then, Italy is also famous and Spain is also famous. But have you ever heard about Australia and wine? Nowadays. But in the past, nobody was thinking about Australia. How can Australia enter the market and with the wine? But you can read about that particular thing, how they actually found a niche for themselves. So they didn't want to compete with those highly well-established, French wines that you have a history of, 500 years, who knows how long. They actually found their niche to a different population that is not necessarily looking for fancy wine, but something that is cool, and they came up with their own wine. So I wanted you to think about that book because it's really, really, and the whole concept is really, really useful. Now, here we come with our wonderful theme of political ideology. In the past, we have, before 1990s, foreign direct investments were really limited to a certain number of countries, but later on we have a lot of changes and transition economies, and we have actually liberalization on markets. So many more countries started to open their actually markets for foreign direct investment. And that's another reason why we have actually increase in foreign direct investment. And I would like to end with this one, and then we will continue with the next class on Thursday with benefits, the cost of foreign direct investments. But I found this one. This is really, really very recent, and it's by your CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev. So let's just hear him, and he's going to talk about Russia investing in Saudi Arabia.
Carol, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you, Hedley, for having
Carol,
me.
so back in 2015, we were talking about in terms of economic diplomacy, where are we Russia and Saudi Arabia?
Hedley, you actually the first person to have. Hedley, you actually the first person to have this interview with me to talk about Saudi Arabia, and many people didn't believe that we'll make much. This interview with me to talk about Saudi Arabia, and many people didn't believe that we'll make much progress, and it seemed too distant because Russia and Saudi Arabia were worlds apart. We had lots of differences during Soviet times. We had lots of differences in many politics in the Middle East. But now I can report to you that we made really breakthrough. And this is a breakthrough because President Putin and King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman really believed that it's possible to bring Russia and Saudi Arabia closer together, and it really happened.
Walk me through that process, because it's incredibly interesting from a historical perspective that we've come so far so quickly. What was the main driver there?
I think it's a really important case study because it shows that it's possible to build alliances. And one of the key steps was to say, let's separate Syria issue from areas where we can make progress. Because it would be very easy to just get stuck on discussing Syria and not letting other issues progress. But we said, let's build trust in other areas, and then we'll work on Syria. So we started with investments, and there was a $10 billion commitment by Saudi Arabia. Already 2.5 billion are invested in 25 projects in many sectors in Russia, in infrastructure, internet, many other areas. Also, oil deal. That was a big build of trust, where we believed we can stabilize oil markets, we stabilized them, and we really executed on a deal with 100% compliance. And then we also mapped out other areas of cooperation in the areas of culture and many others as well, which are executed on as well.
What happens next, especially within the energy space? Because there are opportunities for cross investment when it comes not just to oil infrastructure, but also gas infrastructure as well. Are we going to see the RDIF and Russia generally invested in that Aramco IPO?
Well, first of all, we are partners with Aramco. We found a energy fund, and one of the deals we are going to be announcing, and we are going to announce 10 new investments tomorrow, is in the space of technology that works well in Russia and the world for pipes for oil companies, and Aramco will both be an investor and a user of the technology. So we believe we can actually invest in lots of technology companies that serve our markets. I cannot comment too much on Aramco IPO, other than Aramco obviously showed major resilience throughout the attack, and definitely it's a very interesting asset going forward, and a very strong company, obviously one of the most successful world companies.
But it's something that you guys would be open to in terms of investing in that IPO.
Well, I think we'll see what the terms are, and I'm sure there will be lots of demand for the IPO.
Walk me through what happens next in terms of other investments. We're talking about agriculture. We're talking about artificial intelligence. There are a lot of areas of opportunity.
Definitely. So we formed this base through 30 already existing investments. We'll be announcing 10 new ones, and they're very interesting in different areas. So one is in agriculture. And imagine, actually, wheat exports were prohibited by Saudi Arabia from Russia. So we couldn't export wheat. Now it's allowed, and we will jointly invest with SALIC, which is a major Saudi investor, in many agricultural opportunities in Russia. We are going to announce lots of partnerships in fertilizer, because both Saudi and Russia do what we call green fertilizer. It's fertilizer that doesn't have many substances that are bad for humans, so we believe we can actually market a green fertilizer brand. We are going to announce launching satellites into space, probably from the Saudi Arabia territory, so one of the companies we are going to invest in. And obviously artificial intelligence and many other areas. So really, we are not talking about the strategic partnerships that Saudi has with the US. And what we are doing is not against the US. It's actually building something that is very positive, and building something that helps Saudi economy, Russian economy, and builds a friendship between our nations.
So you don't consider this filling a void that the United States has left?
No, I think it's very important to be builders, and this is what we've done with our Saudi partners, and also having major respect. We respect initiatives of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, that he allowed many new reforms, bringing tourism, bringing other things. So it comes from our deep respect of what's happening in Saudi Arabia, our appreciation of his reforms, and an opportunity that we believe is there for us to invest in Saudi Arabia and for Saudi Arabia to invest in Russia.
Back in 2015, as you say, there were a lot of raised eyebrows and naysayers about the potential for Russia and Saudi Arabia, Russia and the UAE to work together. You really led that charge to make all of this happen. How did that happen for you?
Well, I still remember one of the articles I actually showed to Khalid Al-Faleh, who is a former Minister of Energy in Saudi Arabia, and the article said Russian-Saudi cooperation in oil is a hogwash. And I actually said, Khalid, we need to prove it wrong. And I think it's very good that our energy minister is quite active. We have lots of effort in many other ministries and companies. Our Russian railroads want to build railroads in Saudi Arabia. And I think the fundamental issue is that actually Russian and Saudi cultures are quite close. People like to joke, we really value relationships. It's not a transactional culture, it's a relationship-driven culture. So many of those aspects came to be, but of course we focused on the results, and the major result of what we've achieved is trust in many areas, and as you said, it's a good foundation for new things to go forward.
Many in the West discuss Russia's ambitions globally, and they consider that a part of what we call the Great Game. Is this a new chapter, do you think, for Russia?
Well, I would actually go back a little bit, and we'll show you some of the cultural exhibits we have here. I think we need to go back that US, Russia, Saudi, many other nations, actually common people have common values. And we need not to forget that Saudi, Russians, Americans, they want their families to do well, their children to be healthy, environment not to be polluted. And I think the world has forgotten about this. So again, it's not an attack on US presence in the region, but it's an opportunity to build very important bridges because Saudi Arabia is obviously a key player in the Muslim world, a key player in the region, and I think we need to go back to basics. And by the way, I'm sure that Saudi example is very interesting to try at some point to restore relationship with the US. Because if we could do it with Saudi Arabia in 4 years, why can't we do it with the US going forward?
When you look at what happens next, not just for Russia, but Saudi Arabia, for the UAE, there is a trend of people looking eastward, whether it be for investment, economic opportunity, even new security arrangements, for example. What is that trend? How would you describe it?
Well, definitely Asia plays a big role in the world, and cooperation between Asia, Russia, Middle East is becoming stronger and stronger. And we feel that, this is part of the world that is not focused on trade wars. It's a part of the world that tries to have inclusive growth, and that's important. And there is major synergy, for example, between Russia, China, and Saudi. We actually announced Russian-China Saudi Fund, and is going to make investments soon. So I think this angle of Middle East, Russia, Asian markets is a very interesting angle because there's lots of growth opportunities in all those markets. And of course, situation in Middle East is still quite volatile, and we know about geopolitical tensions. But there is no doubt that there is a major opportunity to grow Saudi economy. And by the way, UAE economy is a great example of success. What UAE has been able to do to really build very professional companies, professional investment teams, to really transform its economy and diversify in many ways away from oil is very remarkable.
Using cultural and economic diplomacy to build bridges, as we've discussed for several years now, has really worked out, at least so far, for Russia. And you've been at the forefront of so many of that, much of that movement. What happens next? Where else do you want to go that you're not?
Well, I think first of all, we need to really stabilize and improve our relationships with Europe. And eventually, we do want to improve relationship with the US.
You think it's
and
possible?
By the way, we believe it's inevitable. So as far as Europe, we have joint fund with France, joint fund with Italy, and actually European businesses we work quite a bit with. And Europe is a major trading and investment partner for us. So I think Europe and restoration with Europe is the question of the next year, maybe a year and a half. And I think the US is also very important because we can solve many of the world problems, including environmental problems, only together. So I think we have to start thinking about joint solving of some issues that are good for the world. And again, remember that many of us have common values, and this is the basis of cooperation going forward.
This is a historic visit by President Putin to Saudi Arabia. And it comes at a time, particularly in the region, where there are a lot of questions about, as you mentioned, a vacuum of power, the United States seeming withdrawal from a lot of the key issues facing those in power today in this region, particularly the situation in Syria. What are the opportunities, do you think, in the conversations that are going to happen over the coming days between President Putin and the leaders here in Saudi Arabia and the leaders here in the UAE as well, to move the dial forward, to create a conversation, at least, to start that conversation?
Well, President Putin announced some important initiatives that he will be discussing. One is bringing Syria back into the League of Arab States, and another one is to really have more discussion on regional stability. And Russia really believes in dialogue. We don't believe in going into other countries and changing, governments there. We believe that those attempts have really worked very poorly. And if you look just mathematically on the probability of success of changing a government in a country and having it prosper, they're pretty much close to zero. So Russia believes in engagement. Obviously, it has good relationship with Iran as well, but maybe it can play a good role in thinking about, really solving some of the regional tensions, which are definitely very significant. But Russia works with Iran, works with Turkey, works with Saudi Arabia, works with UAE, and it really tries to figure out solutions in a positive way, and not trying to be opposed to any of those nations, but try to work out on solutions with them.
So would you say that Russia then is the Middle East's main power broker today?
Well, again, I think, first of all, I'm focused on investments and economy. I think Russia offers a very interesting inclusive model that is not a model of one against another. And President Putin spoke about this in his interview.
Carol, let's head in and see some Kandinsky.
Great.
Now, as I will be ending every class, I want each of these groups to tell me in one sentence, in two sentences, what did you learn tonight that was interesting for you, different, or anything. Who wants to start? Which group wants to start? I guess Dennis is always going to rescue us. No, not tonight. Not tonight. He's not feeling well tonight. Okay. Who would like to start? You can talk about this video as well. What did you get from the video?
For me, it was interesting that Russian business is very involved in Saudi Arabian business, and Russians made a lot there. Trade, they build, for example, Russian railroads want to build their yeah, and
So I need somebody else to tell me something else, and then we're all free to go and do all those papers that you are going to do at 9 o'clock in the evening. So who wants to say something that you got from tonight's class? Say something? No, why not? Anybody else? Okay.
It was really interesting to know about foreign direct investments, like to consider all these risks, all opportunities, and all options for investors, and for foreign investors, for local investors, and it forced me to think about the advantages and the disadvantages for each side in this process, and in which sphere it's more profitable to invest money, like where legislative barriers are lower, where higher, and it's a really interesting topic for research.
One more. Okay, yes, rescue us.
I also would like to talk about the last video. Kirill Dmitriev said one important thing, that the most important thing for everyone, for every country, is to make sure that all people are happy, kids are healthy, and they are not trying to compete with other countries. They just trying to raise their economy and to make some bridges if it's possible.
Yes, very good. At the end of the day, we all have similar system of values, in a sense that we all want for our children to be a little bit happier and better off than we are. Well, on that note, thank you for tonight, and then I hope to see all of you on Thursday and talk about culture.